Bandwidth for changelog is provided by Fastly. Learn more at fastly.com. Error monitoring is provided by Rollbar. Learn more at rollbar.com. And we're hosted on Linode servers. Head to linode.com/changelog. This episode is brought to you by Command Line Heroes, a new podcast from Red Hat. In this podcast series, you'll be hearing true epic tales of the developers, hackers, and open source rebels revolutionizing the tech landscape. Here's a preview of the second episode, OS Wars Part 2, Rise of Linux.
Okay, imagine for a second that you're Microsoft in 1991. You're feeling pretty good, right? Pretty confident? Assured global domination feels nice. You've mastered the art of partnering with other businesses, but you're still pretty much cutting out the developers, programmers, and sysadmins that are the real foot soldiers out there. There is this Finnish geek named Linus Torvalds. He and his team of open source programmers are starting to put out versions of Linux, this OS kernel that they're duct taping together. If you're Microsoft, frankly, you're not too concerned about Linux, or even about open source in general. But eventually, the sheer size of Linux gets so big that it becomes impossible for Microsoft not to notice. The first version comes out in 1991, and it's got maybe 10,000 lines of code. A decade later, there'll be 3 million lines of code. And in case you're wondering, today, it's at 20 million. But for a moment, let's stay in the early 90s. Linux hasn't yet become the behemoth we know now. It's just this strangely viral OS that's creeping across the planet, and the geeks and hackers of the world are falling in love with it. Discovering Linux was like gaining access to a secret society. Programmers would share the Linux CD set with
So
friends,
everybody knows
the same
how
way
this
other
story
people
plays
would
out,
share
right? Everybody listening to the show knows about open source, knows Linux, and you know how this story plays out. And what's important to think about is that this little thing called Linux has such a huge impact. It started somewhere. And that may be you today. It may start somewhere with you today. But to hear more about this story, you got to listen to it. So, true tales of makers who are transforming tech from the command line up. Open source rebels. Subscribe where you get your podcasts or visit redhat.com/commandlineheroes. All right, welcome back. This is the Changelog, and I'm your host, Adam Stacoviak, editor-in-chief and founder of changelog.com. And I want to share something awesome with you. We've been working so hard on a brand new version of our site. Head to changelog.com right now. I promise you, you will not be disappointed. If you love our email once a week, you're going to love everything we've been doing. It is the foundation we're building upon. News and podcasts for developers. Head there now. Subscribe today. On today's show, Jared and I talked to Kevin Owocki, the founder of Gitcoin. Gitcoin is a platform to monetize or incentivize work in open source software. We talked about Gitcoin and how it sits at the intersection of sustaining open source and cryptocurrencies, two topics we absolutely love. We covered their history and their roadmap, their decision to leverage the brand name of Git, bug bounties, funded issues, Web3, MetaMask, and the future of Gitcoin and how open source benefits.
So Kevin, Gitcoin sits at the intersection of two topics that we've been tracking for a while now. The first one is sustaining open source, and the second one is cryptocurrencies and blockchains and all that jazz. Mm-hmm. So let's start with the sustainability side of Gitcoin. Why is this a problem that you're personally interested in solving?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I love starting with why, because I think that everything sort of flows from that. But I've been a software developer for the last 15 years. I have a degree in computer science way back in 2006. And since then, I've built my entire career off of open source software and the GitHub ecosystem, which I think is like a pretty generational thing. If I was born 15 years earlier, I probably would have been doing a lot of Microsoft Stack stuff and a lot of closed source stuff. But my career has been built upon Python and Django and Nginx and Postgres, tools like that. And so those are all open source projects. And at least the pattern that I've seen with my own open source projects, if you go to my GitHub, you'll see that there's about 15 of them, is that they kind of shark fin. in that the interest really peaks when I get a fit of inspiration. I put something out there, build a small community, and then something else happens that I'm interested in, and I move on. But the bug reports and the community relying on the software doesn't end. So by using blockchain for incentivization mechanics and to sustain open source and to delegate tasks to the crowd, we're meant to try and fix that problem a little bit.
So you're doing it with Gitcoin. Give us the elevator pitch of what this is and what it does for people.
Yeah, sure. So Gitcoin is a portmanteau of GitHub and Bitcoin. And what that means is we take any GitHub issue, you already work on GitHub, and we allow you to incentivize that issue by attaching a cryptocurrency bounty to it. So if there's some bug on a repo in open source that I'm relying on, and I can see that issue board is overwhelming, or it's got a lot of issues on it, I can place a cryptocurrency bounty on that issue in order to incentivize the repo maintainer to turn around the scope that I would like turned around preferentially. So it adds incentivization mechanics to open source software. And let's see, the community is about 1,700 people at this point. I'd say that people join Gitcoin, to make a little bit of money in open source, but also just to learn about blockchain with a set of peers that are also excited about Ethereum and Bitcoin and the evolving Web3 ecosystem.
Cool. We'll definitely unpack the Web3 topic here soon. Let's talk about the
first time
name
on the show too. Web3. Nobody's ever said that yet.
That's right. We're
cracking it here.
You started the Web 2.0 show back in the day, didn't you?
Yeah. That's an interesting aside there. The Web 2.0 show obviously came around with Web 2.0. A lot of gradients, a lot of rounded corners, we used to always say. And that was a fun show.
Ajax.
Started back in 2004, and I think it ended around 2009.
Okay.
Maybe we'll have to get the Web 3 show going after
There you
this.
go.
What do you think?
Bring it back, man.
I just find it so amusing that you're describing the way you define Web 2 is rounded corners and gradients. Like for me, it'd be iOS apps and social media, but
Oh, really? I think iOS came after Web 2.0. I think
yeah.
Web 2 was, for me, the epitome or the
Ajax.
start of it was Ajax, specifically dig.com. Okay, so you had like the democratization of content. Dig.com was huge, and they had their little dig button. And the first time I remember this very distinctly, I clicked that dig button and the counter update without the page reloading. I lost it. I flipped out. I was like, what is this magic? And that was when Ajax just became the bee's knees. And to me, that's Web 2.0. But definitely Adam speaks to the design style back then because he's bringing a designer's eye to the game.
Yeah, for sure. I forgot about dig.com. Wow, it's been so long. Reddit is where it's at. Reddit was like the number 2 back when Dig was like the number 1 content aggregator of that era.
Right.
So times have changed.
Dig kind of self-destructed. I was anti-Reddit because I was such a Dig fanboy that I skipped Reddit, went straight to Hacker News, and then Hacker News became a cesspool. So I went back and found Reddit, and I'm like, okay, I got a few cesspools to hang out in, and that's the current state of affairs, at least in my life.
Yeah.
Interesting. So Web 3.
Web 3. So we'll table that for a second. Well, let's get to the name Gitcoin because Adam, you and I were arguing about this, and
we were searching for like at least 20 minutes. Like, what is it really a coin or not?
Right, because you said people can place bounties with cryptocurrencies, and so the assumption that I made, and I was searching for it, I was wondering the current sale price of the GIT coin of Git, looking for a token and a ticker symbol and all that. And to be clear to the audience, and you can explain some of the mechanics there, Kevin, is that there's no Git coin. It's just that portmanteau or two of GitHub and Bitcoin or Git and Bitcoin. Yeah. But there's no Git coin.
Yeah. And that's actually a question that we get a lot. And I don't know how many of your listeners are familiar with the ICO phenomenon, but there's this phenomenon in blockchain right now that's called ICO, and it stands for initial coin offering. And the way it works is that if you have an idea for a startup you want to build in the blockchain ecosystem, you typically, the standard has become you publish a white paper describing the idea, and the white paper also includes a specification for something called a token sale. And tokens are just unique assets that are available and trackable on the blockchain that entitle you to some right related to the project. So if you had like a distributed file storage network, then you could release a token called Filecoin that would give you rights to store information on that distributed file network. It's like a very basic example of what a token is. And so we've kind of gone through this last year in which token sales have become really, really hot. People are 100xing their money on some token sales. And people kind of expect a blockchain project to have a token and a token sale associated with it. I have 15 years of startup experience, and I've never seen anyone ever raise $50 million, $80 million without even having a product to market yet. And so just like spiritually, it kind of felt wrong to back Gitcoin with a token when there wasn't even a network. I'm talking about this fall when I was putting the project together. So what we decided to do is self-fund for a little while and build a community and reach product market fit. And it's possible that there will be a token down the line, but I think that it's really important to have a culture that's focused on building things and learning about the ecosystem, instead of like, you go on the Telegram channel for some of these tokens, and in all they talk about is the price of the token. It's just like it kind of like poisons the culture, I think, if you tokenize too early. So that's sort of where the project is at. But it's something that we're trying to work out with the name, is how do we capture the conciseness and the spirit of the project with the name, but also let people know that there's no token. It's just a network that's built around building.
We've been camping out in this sector for a while now, and have never really had deeper conversations like this on the show, other than the Ethereum show and the shows we've done around blockchain and Hyperledger. But then you just said tokenize too early, which I had never heard that phrase yet. So I guess if you're on the in, if you're where you're at, maybe that's a often thrown around phrase. But maybe another thing to talk about might be, the attachment to the brand Git, right? We've seen some brands use it. Obviously, GitHub is the most influential user of a Git-based business brand. And there's several others that have come and gone or still exist. GitLab is another one that's a direct competitor to GitHub. What's your attachment to, what's the financial ramifications of that? What are some of the downfalls? What are some reasons why you chose the name Gitcoin, or even, get involved anyways? Why is that thing?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that, there's obviously the attachment to Git, the version control system. When I moved from CVS to SVN and then over to Git, with version control, it was just kind of one of those mind exploding kind of moments to see how easy it was to do branching and merging with the Git software. And I think that's doubly important given the framing that I gave you earlier about open source software powering hundreds of thousands of technical careers, and open source software being a path to middle class life for millions of Americans and probably tens of millions of people worldwide. So I mean, I think that there's that. There's obviously the sort of like action oriented way that you can use the coin with a double entendre. You're getting coins, which I think is cool. But so I mean, and I think that there's as you mentioned, there's GitLab, there's GitHub, there's another project out here in Colorado where I'm based called Git Prime, and I think that hopefully we don't see any fatigue or any of these projects kind of at each other's throats because of the mutual use of the word Git. It's kind of becoming an overloaded term.
Isn't Git itself trademarked and owned, copywritten by Linus or Linux Foundation or some legal entity that would own the rights to that?
Yeah, it's something that when we were starting the project, we talked to our friends at another project that had used the Git trademark, and we had worked out sort of a scheme in which we had thought that we can use that and still be in good legal waters. But I'm trying to get, it's not that easy to email Linus, believe it or not. So I'm trying to find a way to get in touch with them. And I just think that, they're the spiritual ancestors of a generation of open source software, and I'd love to get in touch with them and see what they think about using blockchain for incentivization. If you read the Cathedral and the Bazaar, all the stuff about being open to the point of promiscuity and delegating everything, like I think that a lot of that came from Linus. So I'd love to get involved in that respect. And yes, obviously the trademark stuff is something that we're looking at also.
Cool. So the general flow of this conversation, I want to talk about really the idea and the model first, and then we'll dive into the technicals and the details. And you can unpack a lot of these words that are either confusing or confound jargon that we don't understand as people who aren't building blockchain technologies, MetaMask, ERC20, Web3, dApps, like all of these things that can intimidate people when they're coming to this space. We'll dive into all that afterwards. So let's talk about the concept a little more. You mentioned incentivizing like open source contribution through currency, right? Really through a programmable currency. What does that look like? The obvious one is bug bounties. Is bug bounties, in terms of the model of payment, the end all be all of Gitcoin, or is it just getting started?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're focused on incentivization on any GitHub issue. But that said, there's specific types of issues that are more easily delegatable than other GitHub issues. Obviously, if you're kicking off a large epic or a large project, you don't want to delegate that just to the crowd, because that's going to need central architecture and the left brain talking to the right brain on that project. Right. So we'd like to say that any issue where the ROI is high of crowdsourcing it is a good issue to put on Gitcoin. And I think you gave the example of bug bounties. And I think that that's a great place to start, provided that the README is up to date, the code base is well tested, and the issue is reproducible. All of those things make it very easy to specify a bug that needs to be fixed. And those type of issues are really delegatable out to the crowd.
What are the kinds of projects that would be able to fund? Or, I mean, in other words, you're creating a marketplace, right, of workers and payers, and you're using cryptocurrency as the mechanism for payment. But that's not necessarily generating the money, right? So, like, if I have an open source project and I have some stuff that I want done on it, and maybe it's really valuable in certain ways, but not necessarily, I'm not a big business, or I don't have a stack of cash on me, I can't incentivize work on that based on Gitcoin because I don't have any coin, right? So who's going to be bringing the money to this platform? Because it's classic, two-edged network problem of chicken and egg. You need to have bounties. You need to have money there for developers to be interested. And you have to have developers for people with money to be interested. So how are you going to bridge that gap and bring those people together?
Yeah, I mean, I think that starting a double-sided market, as you noted, is kind of a chicken and the egg problem, right? So how is Gitcoin going to do that? So there's the short-term strategy and there's the long-term strategy. I'll start with the short-term strategy so you can see how we're getting the wheels turning. Gitcoin has now partnered with Consensus, which is a large blockchain venture studio based out of Brooklyn, New York. And they also happen to sponsor some of the best projects in Web3 in the Ethereum ecosystem. Projects like MetaMask or Truffle or Consensus Diligence, Grid Plus are using Gitcoin to incentivize action on their repositories. And those names might not mean a lot to a lot of your listeners, but if you're in Ethereum, then those are A-list brands. And so I think that having Gitcoin being used on some of those amazing projects, some of those foundational projects, has really started to juice the the wheels on the double-sided market. And right now, since we're all in the same portfolio, blockchain venture fund, due to all being involved in consensus, there's kind of I don't want to use the word synergy, but I'm just going to use it because I can't think of anything else.
Don't do it.
Synergy.
There's a synergy there where we place bounties on their issues, and it gets more issues gets more users to Gitcoin, and it also pushes their repos forward. So that's how we're getting it started. But the long-term vision is to sell into projects that are cryptocurrency based, and to let them see that if you're a project that just raised an ICO of $10 million and a token sale of $10 million, and you've got some ether to spend and you're trying to hire up, Gitcoin is a great way to augment your development team with crowdsourced tasks. And it's also a great way to recruit, because everyone I know who's recruiting software engineers likes to do a little test pilot project with them, or at least some sort of technical interview to see what it's going to be like working with them. And what better way to figure out what it's going to be like to work with someone than to work with someone on something that's actually on the roadmap, and as opposed to something that just approximates what the working conditions would be like. So that's the short-term view. And then the long-term view is that Gitcoin is building up a suite of tools that are meant to help incentivize work in open source software. And in the future, it will not just be paying money in return for directed action on your repo. We'll actually allow repo maintainers to raise money using their GitHub repos. And the first step that we've taken towards that is by partnering with codesponsor.io, and Eric Berry, who is the CEO over there, has done an amazing job of building an ethical advertising network for open source software to allow repo maintainers to make a little bit of money off of the value they've created for the world. So I think that project pairs really well with Gitcoin, in that repo maintainers can raise money with CodeSponsor and then potentially spend that money on pushing their repo forward.
Very cool. That's exciting. We're big fans of CodeSponsor and friends with Eric, so happy to hear that that's going down, and he continues to be able to work on that project, which otherwise looked like it was going to stall due to limitations on GitHub's platform. So that's very cool. Have you considered, so we mentioned like directed action, and it makes tons of sense to me that your prime place to get people to bring funds to the platform is blockchain companies, because like you said, a lot of them have a lot of dispensable money that they may or may not have earned through displaying the abilities or future potential of their networks and products. And like you said, they're also looking for people with applicable skills. What about security audits? Because that is a necessary thing, especially now that more and more of these developers who are working on these projects are writing code that directly moves money in and out of people's pockets. Surely security audits are going to become more and more essential as more and more companies have programmatic money. Have you considered Gitcoin as a potential platform for, soliciting audits and that kind of stuff?
I mean, just to take a step back before I answer your question, it is horrifying to go from web development, where the worst thing you can do in the world is like drop a table in your database or like send an email erroneously, to a place where you're moving tens of thousands of dollars programmatically using your code. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a conceptual leap that if you're coming from web development, then it's sort of like a skill that we as a generation of software engineers needs to build. So I think you framed that really nicely when you said that these smart contracts are moving around a lot of money. But to answer your question, the applicability of Gitcoin that we've seen has been around security bounties in this area. So basically what you do is you put out a bounty for, let's call it 2 Ethereum, which is worth roughly $2,000 right now. And you say, I invite anyone in the community to find a security hole in my product. And according to the OWASP model, if you find a critical bounty, if you find a critical issue, then you earn out the entire bounty. If you find a major one, you earn out 60%, et cetera. I think that when you're talking about security audits, which are more of like a you don't really want the crowd working on a security audit. You want someone who's
Right.
got a lot of experience with smart contracts, and you probably are better contracting with consensus diligence in order to get that done, I think.
Hmm.
That's an interesting take too on funding open source, because like traditional models have been here on your homepage you've got find funded GitHub issues, which is the exact
Hmm.
reversal of like, hey, just give a community or a project or several maintainers just money and hope they do well with it. Where this is
Hmm.
actually funding directly, not so much somebody buying issues, because somebody could just say, hey, project, here's 10,000 US dollars, convert that to uh, ETH or Bitcoin and fund whatever issues you need done. Like this is an interesting model of like funding the work rather than like
Hmm.
just hopefully giving money altruistically or charity wise. And
Hmm.
you know what I mean? Like this sort of like puts value on the table on both ends. Monetary value for those doing the work, but at the same time, ways for open source to thrive and move forward in terms of progress.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that's really important in the Gitcoin model is that the people who are funding the work are aligned on the roadmap with the leaders of the repository. Like there's a Venn diagram there of the incentives and the governance of the repo. And the ideal case is that that Venn diagram has heavy overlap. But I mean, I think that the macro trend that you're seeing with Gitcoin and some of these other projects that incentivize software development is the unbundling of corporate sponsorship of open source software. So, there's the Red Hat Foundation and there's the Apache Foundation, and there's all these other corporate sponsors of open source software. What if you could unbundle those business models and allow the crowd to sponsor open source instead of just having corporate sponsorship of open source? And I think blockchain allows you to manage things a lot more granularly than
Hmm.
the legacy financial system does.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think from a developer's perspective, eventually you may find, if we find success with this model, a potential race to the bottom in terms of we're commoditizing our work to a point where it's not worth as much, which, maybe that's just the fact of life, but that seems like a
Mhm.
potential downside for developers is now you're basically not necessarily bidding. It's not an auction for these things, but you have the projects placing the value and more people coming to that. Now you have people, the competition gets stiffer, which will be fine. But then the other side of that is you have kind of a local maxima problem where the work that is going to be done needs to be very small chunks and very well specified. And it's never the big picture stuff, kind of like you said earlier, Kevin, that your left brain and your right brain talking together. You
Mhm.
can't, it's difficult to crowdsource a Vitalik Buterin to do his job, that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So your thoughts on those?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. And the commoditization of work is something that I think about a lot because Gitcoin is a fairly mission-driven project, and it's built by developers for developers. And I'd like to think that we're building into a world that developers is going to be better for developers, that developers want to live in. And there's sort of like
Mm-hmm.
the Upwork problem or like the top coder problem, where like you're basically racing to the bottom to bid for work that's not priced very well. And so we're taking steps to make Gitcoin a place where people can build their careers and build their portfolios and gain leverage over their lives. And I think that like one major step that we've taken since we last talked about Gitcoin is taking a stand against spec work, which I think is spec work is just basically like you turn around work for a bounty submitter, and you might get paid or you might not get paid. So it's called speculative work. So we're trying to do a better job of allowing someone to claim a bounty and then have like a semaphore, like a lock, so that they're not doing spec work. And the other thing that we're looking to do is to branch Gitcoin from just being bounties and tips for open source softwares to being an entire suite of tools that allows you to be successful in this new blockchain-centric world, where the work is unbundled from working for a company and more centric around what project am I working on and what issues am I working on this week. And a couple products that you might see come from us that are meant to support the community in that vein in the next several months are a mentorship tool. So if you're a junior developer and you want to get paired up with a senior developer, someone who has experience in blockchain, then we will hook you up with that. We are also looking at putting together a project, like a co-founder matching sort of system. So basically, if you're a technical person and you need funding for your project, if you're a funder and you're looking for a mission to get involved in, then Gitcoin has a lot of candidate flow and a lot of developer flow right now. So Gitcoin can hook you up with people who can help you advance your agenda and advance your career in the longer term. But those are all things that are on the roadmap, and it's an evolution that we're looking to go through in Q1 and Q2 of this year.
I actually think that suite of tools addresses my other statement as well regarding the
small chunks, I think.
Yeah, the small chunks. And as well, I mean, I guess the point I was trying to get to is there's certain developers or certain minds that the best model for them is to find a sponsor or a group of sponsors, and that allows for them to just work and just do their thing. And the world will be a better place if that just happens, you know? And so maybe, you know, with a suite of tools, you know, you're not just bug bounty, you're not just tips, you have this mentorship thing, you have co-founder matching. Suddenly you're like a Tinder for developers. Oh, that's crazy. And, you know, perhaps there's even space for different kinds of scenarios to be built into the platform. So I think that answers it.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're doing is we're basically building the emergent future of work. And if you think about the legacy model of how people find work, it just seems very broken to me. I mean, I wrote this whole series of blog posts about 2 years ago about how recruitment for software engineers is just fundamentally broken. I mean, you get this spam message from someone on LinkedIn who barely understands your profile and barely understands the job that they're pitching, and they get paid out 15% of the first year's salary of that engineer in exchange for getting that recruitment task turned around. And I just think that you're fundamentally better off when you have the people that you're working with involved in finding work and matching those people up directly. So I think that what we're looking to do is disrupt the way work has been done traditionally in large corporations and bring that more in sort of like a granular blockchain direction.
This episode is brought to you by our friends at Linode. Everything we do here at Changelog is hosted on Linode cloud servers. Pick a plan, pick a distro, and pick a location, and in minutes, deploy your Linode cloud server, drool-worthy hardware, native SSD cloud storage, 40 gigabit network, Intel E5 processors, simple, easy control panel, VMs for full control running Docker containers, encrypted disks or VPNs, 99.9% uptime guaranteed, 24/7 customer support, 10 data centers, 3 regions, anywhere in the world they've got you covered. They also have cloud.linode.com, which is an open source single page application. Find that at github.com/linode/manager. Plans start with 1 gig of RAM for $5 a month or high memory plans at 16 gigs. Head to linode.com/changelog, get 4 months free with their basic server, $20 in hosting credit. Once again, linode.com/changelog.
Kevin, why don't you tell us how Gitcoin works from a user's perspective, and then we'll talk about from a technical perspective after that.
Yeah, sure. So Gitcoin, as we mentioned before the break, is a double-sided market that allows you to crowdsource work on any GitHub issue. So if you are a repository owner or a maintainer of some sort, you can go to gitcoin.co, click on the Fund Issue button, and when you paste in a GitHub issue, we will preload a bunch of different metadata about that issue, like the title, the description, the keywords associated with the skill sets that you would need in order to turn around that issue, and provide you with a nice little fund issue button that you can click, and that will submit that funded work to the blockchain. And once that funded work is on the blockchain and you've staked some Ether or some Ethereum-based token associated with the work, that'll get fished out to the Gitcoin Issue Explorer. And the Gitcoin Issue Explorer is the repository of work that bounty hunters can turn around. So we've got a community of about 2,000 software developers who are looking to learn blockchain, who are looking to make Ether or Ether tokens in exchange for doing software work, and from there they can claim the work, turn around the work, and they can get paid out in exchange for turning around the work. And so that's like sort of like the end to end of the use case, but the outcome for both parties is that the repo maintainer got some work that was on their roadmap turned around, and the bounty hunter makes some Ethereum, adds to their GitHub cred, also their Gitcoin reputation, and they also have formed a new relationship that could lead to future work or maybe even a full-time job in blockchain. So that's sort of like the end to end of the bounty flow on Gitcoin.
Very cool. So I'm looking at the Issue Explorer now, and for the listener's sake, Kevin and I have chatted a while back, maybe about a month and a half ago, and it looks like you got a lot more open issues today than you did back then. So congrats on getting a little bit of progress on that front.
Thanks. Yeah, I think the statistic is $50,000 has been exchanged on the platform over the last couple months, and we didn't even realize when we passed that milestone. Our community guy was saying, "Oh, we should have celebrated," but I guess we'll have to celebrate once we cross 100K.
There you go. But on the technical side, as you load up in the top left corner, I don't know what yours, Adam, but mine says Web3 disabled.
Yes.
Please install MetaMask. So here's where whatever the current web is meets this new Web3 thing. Tell us about this and what Web3 is and why I need to enable it to use Gitcoin.
Okay. Yeah. So Web3 is oh man, I gotta like take a deep breath because it's just like once you start going into blockchain, you're just in the rabbit hole of this whole world. But yeah, hold on to your butts because we're about to go there. So Web3 is what the Ethereum community calls our vision for the web when the web is blockchain enabled. Just to unpack that a little bit, you have when you browse the web, you're using a web browser. I'm a big fan of Google Chrome, but I also have Brave and I have Opera and Safari installed, and those applications are great at making HTTP requests to a server and then receiving a response and rendering all of the HTML, CSS, JavaScript, that kind of stuff. And in the Web3 model of the world, specifically the Ethereum Web3 model of the world, your browser will become blockchain enabled. And what that means is that it can read from and write to the Ethereum blockchain. And that's an important capability for a browser to have in the Web3 world because the Ethereum blockchain is a store of value and a store of information that can be shared across the entire internet. It allows for something called FAT protocols, which is just basically a way of saying that Gitcoin can share bounties information with, I don't know, the Bounties Network is another bounties project that's out there. And what this does, the reason why it's pretty neat for it to be on the blockchain is that it prevents us from having vendor lock-in for our data. So, I mean, if you think about like some of the problems with Web 2, or at least in my opinion, some of the problems with Web 2 is that your social network is locked into Facebook. Your search history is locked into Google, and if you wanted to transfer them to somewhere else, then it's not self-sovereign. You can't just go to a different social network and take your Facebook social graph with you. And I think that this is a real problem if you look at the prevalence of hacks that have happened, particularly like if you look at the Equifax hack that happened about 6 months ago. You as a consumer don't have self-sovereign control over your identity. And in the Web3 world, you will, because there's these fat protocols where the data is stored on the blockchain in a way that can be migrated from site to site. And you as a user have control over your identity and who you want to give that information through your Web3 enabled browser. So I know I just took y'all through the rabbit hole of what some of this means and what it could potentially mean. But like the TLDR, like the sum is that if you install a browser extension called MetaMask on your Chrome, Brave, or Opera browser, then that will give you Web3 capabilities in the web browser that you already know and love.
Hmm. So is Web3 an Ethereum thing, or is it a blockchain thing?
It's like you're in a car and you like take a look over your shoulder and you almost like don't know your own blind spots, or I don't know. I actually don't even know where I'm going with this analogy. This is like
sounds dangerous.
Yeah, I think I screwed up the analogy, but I think I don't know what I don't know, because Ethereum has 30 times the developer interest that the next biggest smart contract platform has. So I mean, like, maybe there's other projects that have this vision of Web3, but Ethereum's kind of by and large the one that's got the most momentum towards building it. And I also don't pay attention to the other platforms because I just think that Ethereum's becoming the emergent standard for this. So I guess this is a long way of saying I don't know, but who cares if it's not Ethereum?
Okay, I mean, I think there's, maybe tunnel vision was the analogy you're trying to apply there, or maybe that has more of a negative connotation than you'd like to apply, because I mean, it seems like, and I'm removed from the technical details to kind of more philosophical once again, but it seems like you're saying that there's these silos of information and they live in these, in your Facebook, in your Twitter, in your Gmail, and like the Web3 is this freedom of my data to move about and these other things, as well as like basic payments involved. But if it's all on the Ethereum blockchain, then I'm basically just moving from one silo to somebody else's silo. And Ethereum is definitely the initiator of the smart contracts movement and the very first thing of its kind, but rarely is the very first thing of its kind the only thing that has success in that space, or even often not even the main thing 10 years from then. So I'm just wondering if like the Web3 is very much like Ethereum people are doing this, or if they're trying to like bridge all the blockchains or just ask.
Well, I mean, I think, I think it's good to have this check on the Ethereum vision. I mean, I think that one of the powerful things about blockchains is that if you don't agree with the governance of them, you can fork them. Just like you can fork a GitHub repo if you don't believe in the product roadmap or the product maintainers, you can fork it. And you can do the same thing with the blockchain and just create your own. I could create Kev-Theorem and do whatever I want. And the more people that agree with my vision in the world, the more people will follow my fork instead of Vitalik Buterin's fork. Right. So, I mean, I think that, it's a little bit apples to oranges to compare Facebook's and Google's data silos, where they've built this like business model off of spying on their users, and they're not going to give up that data. Like they're going to hold on to the door frame on the way out. Whereas Ethereum is built around this open model in which anyone can fork it. So I think that's a primary difference there.
I think the line I was drawing is more along portability, not necessarily like evil intention. But I definitely agree with you that those are definitely two different things. Let's talk about MetaMask, because it says Web3 is disabled. We'll get back to the technical side, and also maybe the adoption side. Because when it comes time to Web3, we talk about like you have your normal browsers, and then now we have Web3 browsers, which don't really exist. So MetaMask is a Chrome extension. So please install MetaMask. So right now, to ride the Web3, the Ethereum-based web, you're basically talking browser extensions. Is that ever going to be really adopted to a point where it could be, big?
I mean, I'm sort of here to shill Ethereum, so I'm going to say yes. But
he's honest, at least.
Yeah, it is.
More seriously, so I mean, I think that when you look at any new technology, it's all about drivers and barriers for consumers. So one of the big drivers for people getting into blockchain is they want to get rich. Like I've purposefully not talked about the price of any of these assets on this blockchain because it's just like not something, it's not our niche, and it's not something that that I think is the best use of our time. But I think that it is, when people read the articles about the price that you see the press writing, bring a lot of people in. And once they're in and sort of learning about this rabbit hole of blockchain, hopefully their incentivization moves from just getting rich quick to seeing this whole vision of the Web3 world that has less intermediaries, has can disintermediate the financial system. And I think that like the potential that I sum up the drivers in this ecosystem is like, I think that blockchain can do to the financial industry what Napster did to the recording industry. Like that's how big I think this could potentially be. And so like that's how I like to sum up the driver side of the equation. And then the barriers side of the equation is just like, how freaking hard is it to use? And the answer, like, and this fits into your question about MetaMask. Like MetaMask is beautiful. It's this like, they've got their logo is this like polyfill fox that follows your browser, like your cursor around, and it just looks very nice and polished, but you still have to install it in Chrome. And the answer in 2018 is, it's kind of a pain in the butt to install this onto Chrome. But we're building a platform for the future of the web, and the time horizon for what we're building is 10, 30, 50 years. And so I think that you're going to see adoption increase. If you build the right product for the next 5 years, you're going to see adoption massively increase over that time scale.
Yeah, I don't know about you, Adam, but when I see install MetaMask, I'm just like, close tab. I'm done. And I'm an early adopter.
Yeah.
Generally speaking.
Well, I guess it depends on your real reason. Like if we're just here as journalists, doing a podcast, maybe close tab, but just kidding. It kind of depends on your motives, right? But any sort of hurdle that is like above and beyond the norm of like everyday internet as we know it, it's probably like, I'll wait till I hear feedback from really close friends or a really good article from said thought leader, and then I'll dip my toe in. So maybe we need some of those to say, hey.
Or a killer app, right? Like something that's so compelling.
Something that drives you.
For developers, Gitcoin could be that, because like I said, you could get paid, which is what I think Kevin's speaking to, is like, well, there's good money to be made here. And so that's a great driver for people. As we see, people talking about price action are mostly trying to make money quickly. And so that could be a motivating factor. Or some sort of website that you go to and everybody's talking about, and it's not like a CryptoKitties type of a thing, but it's like actually like somewhat revolutionary, and just says, install MetaMask. And at that point, you're like, I really want to use this thing. I guess I'll do that.
So is a browser in the works then at some point, do you think, Kevin? Or is this like you'll just leverage the fact that Chrome and others are out there and you have extensions?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not The honest answer is I don't really know. There's the Mist. The Mist browser is the Ethereum native one, and I think its adoption is like 0.0001% or something like that. But it's more of a reference client.
So that's not a good direction to go then.
Yeah, I mean, I to be honest, I don't know what penetration is going to look like in the next several years. And one of the routes that we've thought about going is having a custodianship model of your funds on Gitcoin. So basically, in this hypothetical version of the world, Gitcoin would hold your private key, do all of the Web3 bridge stuff, and then you could just interact with it with a deposit or a withdrawal function on your on Gitcoin.co. So I mean, I think that that's one direction where things might go, and I think that the big question that's up in the air right now is how much of this blockchain-enabled functionality do we want to put in the end user's hands, into even in like a prosumer's hands, and how much do we want to hide from them and just have blockchain in the back?
I honestly think that model makes a lot of sense for the short term because, people are, especially with small amounts, like if I want to sign up for Gitcoin, maybe I make half an ETH this week and maybe at one, we're talking like hundreds and then maybe thousands of dollars. Over time, of course, it would build up, but then you could just transfer out. I mean, people trust exchanges, like you said, with a custodial model for small amounts and small amount of times. Yeah. And it greatly reduces that barrier of people who are intimidated or, don't want yet another extension or to use Mist. Or doesn't Brave have a lot of this stuff built in? I think Brave's an up and coming browser that a lot of us nerds would be more willing to try. But yeah, I think that might be, we're not necessarily here to give you product advice, but maybe we are. So that might be a good idea.
What he's describing is very analogous to the freemium model of web apps. It's like you got to provide some sort of path to give people the option to try, and you can do it with limitations. So in your case, you can do that with, say, limited funds or some restrictions to protect both them and you, and incentivize them to take the plunge and install Metabase or do whatever necessary hurdles or hoops required to become a full-fledged Web3 user.
Yeah, and I think that it depends on you got to build the right product for the audience that you're going after. One of the reasons why we're sort of making a strategic bet on MetaMask is that we're building a product that's for open source software developers who by definition want to work on blockchain stuff. So I mean, if you're not going to install MetaMask on your browser and use Web3, then you're kind of not willing to put up table stakes to even be serious about the system. But as Gitcoin grows and we try to capture more Web2 projects, we're going to have to either adapt or the users are going to have to adapt. And that's just a reality of consumer internet.
This episode is brought to you by Google Cloud Platform and their awesome weekly podcast where Google developer advocates answer questions, get in the weeds, and talk to experts, customers, and partners about GCP. Here's a preview of episode 111 where Mark Mendel is asking Sam Ramji about products he's passionate about in the future of cloud.
Are there particular technical products that we have or potentially may have in the future that get you really excited? Anything you're particularly passionate about right now?
Oh boy.
Just pick one.
I was going to say clearly I'm not a very passionate person. I'm really lucky. I get to care about all the things I'm doing. There's a lot of really interesting things happening in terms of how do we take code, which is a developer's set of intents, and turn it into running production systems that developers and operators can both collaborate on. There's a whole chain of technologies there, both first-party technologies and third-party technologies. Third-party like Spinnaker that we've gotten into. It's an open source project that was started by Netflix, and we've gotten really involved in it. It's a really nice way to do multi-cloud computing. And all of these things really need to come back to giving developers control of exactly how they want their code turned into an artifact like a container, how they want it structured into services and pods, and where they might want to run it. So I think part of what brought me to Google is this core belief in open hybrid cloud. When I left Cloud Foundry, I had spent 2 years, committing all of my heartbeats to putting technology back under the control of the companies that use it rather than the companies that sell it. And part of what brought me here was Brian Stevens said, our mission is to be the open cloud. I said, you must be kidding me. That doesn't make any sense. Every hyperscale cloud provider is clearly an ambitious monopolist. Not at all, right? So when we look at this.
So if you're looking to move to the cloud or generally interested in deeply technical cloud-focused conversations, check this podcast out. It publishes weekly, and you can subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, YouTube, and more. Head to gcppodcast.com and look for the big subscribe button in the top right-hand corner. Once again, gcppodcast.com.
So let's dive into the technical nitty-gritty from an implementation perspective, and we'll talk more about MetaMask because you can tell us exactly how the browser extension that represents the user somehow as a wallet, I suppose, interacts with Gitcoin specifically, but I'm sure it'll apply generally to, Web3 websites.
Right.
Explain to us how it works from a technical perspective, implementation of the Gitcoin, website with MetaMask and the interactions between the browser extension and the website. And I'm sure there's servers and there's the blockchain. Tell us how it all works technically.
Yeah. So, I think you can think of the blockchain in the Ethereum blockchain as a giant distributed database. And what the blockchain does is it allows you to manage trust between parties across the internet. So one of the reasons why that's really powerful is we can store all the information about the bounty task on the blockchain, and that can be the source of truth for all parties about the state of the task. So in contrast to a legacy financial system crowdsourcing platform like let's say Upwork, for example, Gitcoin never actually is an intermediary that holds any of the funds between the bounty submitter and the bounty hunter. So when you post a bounty to Gitcoin, you're actually submitting it to the Ethereum blockchain, and the funds that you're associating with the issue live on the Ethereum blockchain, which is just a massive simplification over the credit card and legacy financial system, where we would have to deal with translations between currencies and having a legal structure associated with doing escrow and stuff like that. So basically, the task goes onto the Ethereum blockchain, and the way MetaMask works is it's just basically a Ethereum wallet that allows you to confirm that you meant to put that information on the blockchain. And the technology that powers MetaMask is actually RSA, public-private key encryption. So if you want to do a transaction to the Ethereum blockchain, you're signing it with your private key, and that's how the rest of the computers on this giant distributed database know that the funds are authorized to come from you, and that the information actually came from you. So it all goes out there into blockchain world, and then other people can pick up the funded work and turn it around by submitting their own transaction to the blockchain, which claims the funded work on the platform. So this all is functionality that lives on smart contracts on the Ethereum blockchain, and that's a pretty powerful way of removing the need to have an intermediary, the need to do international translation of currency. And the other powerful use case that this enables is the ability to pay your bounty hunters with tokens. So if you think about all these ICOs who have raised $10 to $20 million to fund their projects, they probably have some ether on hand that they can use to incentivize actions out of their community, but they also probably have a native Ethereum token that they can use to incentivize work on their repo. And that's powerful because it allows them to tie their incentives as repo maintainers with the incentives of the person who turned around the work, because they both hold the same token that rises and falls with value, rises and falls in value associated with the work that's being or the success or failure of their project. So I think that that's a interesting use case that could never even exist in the legacy financial world.
So Ethereum is the network, and so Ether is the token. But you're saying that people can use their own compatible tokens for their specific projects.
Yeah, and in that standard is called ERC20. ERC20 is just, it's like, think of it like a Java style interface that defines functions like deposit and withdraw and transfer and things of that nature. And so you can basically mint your own token that can be used for, think of it like a software license for a product that you're putting out there. It's a unique, scarce asset that you can put out on the blockchain.
Very cool. So you could actually post those on Gitcoin as, let's just say, there's a log token, and it's just for us. It's only for us.
Ooh.
We have our issues, and you can say it's this 5 log, and then people will get paid in log, and then that would be fungible with Ether, or do you have to like convert it to Ether before you actually post it?
Yeah. I was just like giggling over here a little bit because I'm a very visceral person, and I think of log and I think of like a little tree stump or something like that. But yeah, I mean, so yes, that's basically how it works. It's sort of a contrived example though, because like the tokens that are most valuable represent some sort of enforceable right to do something special with the tokens. Like your log tokens don't do anything other than have a sort of like branding association with your project. Like in order to give the log tokens actual value so people would care about them, they could be redeemed for something associated with your project, ideally.
Well, you're just assuming our log tokens don't have any value, but maybe they have all sorts of value that I didn't tell you about yet.
Well, in today's ecosystem, I wouldn't be surprised if they went 10x. But
I'm cranking out a white paper tonight. We're gonna have logs in the morning.
It's but I try to take a long-term view on this because I think it's really 1996 right now for blockchain. I mean, that's how early we are in this whole new world, and the pump and dumps and all the tokens that are just cash grabs are eventually going to get filtered out just because of the Darwinian nature of capitalism. But what's going to be left is the Facebook or the Google of Web 3.0. Well, I don't know. Invite me back on in 2025 and we'll see what happens.
We will.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know specifically about Web3 and Ethereum, although it's definitely, like you said, has a huge advantage, and the developer focus is on it. But my current take, and I've been watching this space relatively closely, is that is it a mania and a price bubble and all that? Yes. Is it also like actually revolutionary technologies that someday will change the way things work? Yes, I think both those things are true. And so it's tough to see the long term when you're staring at all of the frauds and the scams and the people who like the BitConnects and stuff that are, going to zero while everybody loses their savings. But that doesn't mean there isn't real value underneath. And I think there is. So that's my take.
Yeah, and I largely agree with you. I mean, I think that another parallel is the internet bubble, and I think the key is to invest in the Yahoo or the Amazon and not the Pets.com.
Right.
And the internet bubble was a bubble, but it was also a fundamental shift in the way the world organizes its information. And so I think that what we're seeing here is a fundamental shift possibly a fundamental shift in the way the world organizes its finances. So I think that blockchain, what TCP/IP did for information, there's the potential that blockchain will do for the financial system. And there's obviously huge upside there, but under the guise of upside, there's going to be the BitConnects of the world, or projects that are just looking to hang on to the trend. And what Gitcoin actually, this is actually one of the reasons I started Gitcoin, was to allow people to have the skills to thrive in this new blockchain ecosystem. I think that educating people and helping them learn to use the tools and build meaningful relationships is how we mature the ecosystem. So it's one of Gitcoin's missions.
Well, let's go there then. So let's imagine a developer who would love to get on, Gitcoin and get paid. Pick an issue. Most of these are related to the Ethereum network. So they're going to have working knowledge of that. I'm trying to pull one that would actually be good for our use case. Multi-auth methods per resource. These are hard to
Sounds
parse.
simple.
Yeah, these are hard to parse live on the air. But let's just say they pick one out and it's for a specific, here's one that was posted by the Truffle team. How does somebody get started? I mean, maybe you can even tell us about how you got started, although I'm sure it's better now than it was back then. It's been a couple of years of maturation, but the jargon, the interaction with the browser extension, with the EVM, the Ethereum virtual machine, writing a smart contract. What are the best ways that people can actually, dip their toes in the water and see if this is the kind of coding that they want to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think that everyone's got different learning styles. Me personally, I learned best through immersion. So I went to hackathons. I read the Truffle docs. I built one of their little tutorials.
What's Truffle for the audience?
Oh yeah, sorry, I'm so saturated in this that I forget that I'm using buzzwords even when. But anyway, so Truffle is think of it sort of like Ruby on Rails, but for the Web3 ecosystem. So it allows you to manage your smart contracts and your tests for them, your migrations, your deployments, stuff like that. So it just makes Solidity and smart contract programming way easier.
Okay. So you said immersion. You went to the hackathons.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the number one value proposition that Gitcoin has for its users is immersion in a community that's excited about blockchain. So if you join our Slack, there's channels for Python, for Solidity, JavaScript, C#, anything whatever programming language you're into. And there's people in there that are excited about blockchain and helping you gain the tools in order to be successful there. So I think that that's the first place that I would recommend people check out when they're trying to get involved in Gitcoin. And then the second thing that you can do is you can go claim an issue out on the Issue Explorer, and that's just an opportunity to get paid to work on open source blockchain issues. And I think that the average hourly rate for a blockchain engineer on Gitcoin has been about $45. So if you're into making a little bit of extra capital while you learn a lot, then that's another way to do it.
That's an interesting perspective too, because some people out there will be doing these things and not really finding a way to financially gain, right? And this is one way you can do kind of what you just said there: do something that you already kind of know a bit about, use your expertise, but at the same time learn a bit more and also get paid. That's not something that you see often.
Yeah, I mean, I think another piece of upside that's sort of important here, if you're playing the long game, is the relationships that you're going to build in this ecosystem. Because the people that you're going to meet on the Gitcoin Slack, or when you turn around an issue for Truffle, are going to start companies or important open source repos that could potentially be hugely important in this new blockchain-based ecosystem. So I think that's one of the upsides that I think people should be focused on, in addition to the extrinsic monetary capital gain stuff.
Yeah, it definitely feels like an ecosystem which is burgeoning but small enough that you can definitely make connections. Like the projects, there is some sort of a, I don't want to call it a symbiotic relationship, but there's an interesting I don't know, like a crossover between open source and blockchain technologies, or like most of them are open source projects as well. They're just like open source projects that are like have their financials either as the foremost thing or at least figured out right up front. And so they operate, they have issues with, how they're going to run their governance, and there's people trying different governance things. They have issues with how the funding all works, and then they have the code and who does what and the bounties. And there's a huge crossover between the two. And so it'd be familiar and yet different, I guess, when you dive into those things. But I guess the point I was trying to get to is when you get involved in an open source project, and over time you make friends, like you said, you network, and there's a real community that forms. And in this case, that same thing can happen. And then the people who are building these things, because it is small and burgeoning, can often can go on to build interesting and different things as well.
Yeah, and I think like the key thing about Gitcoin is it's a way to get involved in the ecosystem when you're not exactly sure what your play is. We've got a lot of people in there who have corporate jobs that they're looking to make a next move from, or they're freelancers who are looking for their next gig, but they recognize that blockchain's this new frontier that could potentially be important. So, and it's only one way to do it. Like, I'm going to the Boulder blockchain meetup tonight to nerd out with people in the local community. And there's going to be a hackathon, an Ethereum hackathon out here in Colorado called ETH Denver in the middle of February. And by the way, applications are still open. If this airs before January 30th, applications are still open. But there's a lot of people in the world who aren't privileged enough, who aren't privileged like I am, and get to just go down the street and go to a blockchain meetup. So by providing an online hangout for people to figure out this ecosystem, I think we're going to help people immerse and be successful. And that's what the mission is. It's to push open source forward and to help people navigate this new ecosystem.
Well, I mentioned your updates to the website since the last time you and I chatted. You've also slightly tweaked your mission statement, your tagline, which was push open source forward. And now it's push open source repos forward. Slight change. Maybe we're staring at the trees and not looking at the forest here, but just that was curious to me. I wonder what your shift in motivation for adding the word repos in there was.
I think you've stumbled upon an A/B test that we're running right now.
Yes. I'm a B test too then, because I've got that as well.
If you're listening to the podcast and you wanna tweet us and let us know whether you like push open source forward, push open source repos forward, or grow open source. It's something we're trying to figure out right now.
Very good.
Grow open. I like them all.
That doesn't help me call the test though.
Yeah, exactly. I think I would go for your original one just because it's just one less word and it's implied, and it also has a larger context because things might live outside of repos.
Well, if you're also reading into the language, pushing sometimes can be slightly aggressive, right? Even if it's for the goodwill of the person or the thing or the object you're pushing. Sometimes it's not even willingly being pushed. So,
that's true.
I kind of like, I think of open source. I'm kind of leaning towards grow open source, and it's because I kind of think of growth is something that happens sort of naturally when you give it the right condition, when you give something the right conditions to grow. And I think that open source, obviously, if you look at a map of how Linux has evolved over time, it kind of looks like a tree. But I like the analogy of the natural world just because, let's be honest, I live in Colorado and I'm kind of a hippie and I love spending time outdoors. But
Actually, the more I think about it, I think I like grow open source too.
All right.
Yeah, I switched I went from A to C. I like C the most on your ABC test. Well, Kevin, anything else you want to chat about with regards to Gitcoin before we let you go?
I think my parting thought would just be that the ecosystem is kind of crazy right now, the blockchain ecosystem. And, if you hold on to your values and you focus on building and don't get caught up in all of the hype and all of the hubbub about price and just focus on building skills and making meaningful relationships, then that's how I advise people to get going in this ecosystem. So build something meaningful.
What about to those maintainers out there that are thinking, geez, I can find more support or find interesting ways to leverage this new stuff happening out there and also fund issues or fund the future?
Yeah, I mean, so the way to get involved with all of that is to follow Gitcoin on Twitter. We're Gitcoin, GETGITCOIN, or to go to gitcoin.co and sign up for the Slack channel. There's a bunch of smart people in there nerding out about blockchain technology, not the price, and building great stuff. So that's a way to get involved in the community.
Cool. Kevin, we'll leave it there, man. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. Thank you for tuning in to the Changelog this week. We love doing this show. And if you love this show, share it with a friend, rate us on Apple Podcast, tell them go to changelog.com and subscribe. Thank you to our sponsors, Red Hat and their awesome new podcast, Command Line Heroes, Linode, and the Google Cloud Platform podcast. Also, thanks to Fastly, our bandwidth partner. Head to fastly.com to learn more. Error monitoring is done by Rollbar. Head to rollbar.com to learn more. And we host everything we do on Linode cloud servers. Head to linode.com/changelog. Check them out. Support this show. The Changelog is hosted by myself, Adam Stacoviak, and Jared Santo. Editing is by Jonathan Youngblood. Our music is produced by Breakmaster Cylinder. Head to changelog.com to keep up. Subscribe today. And we'll see you again next week. Thanks for listening.